We're back. Welcome to this week's episode of Insights, which is the first of the year, obviously. And what we're going to do is, since this is election year, we're going to actually try to go over all the political parties and the main players so you will know who we're discussing over the next few months as we head into the elections in June. Let's start with the party that's actually making the greatest amount of news, which is it's a party called Merzevov, which in English translates to Our Way. This is the party of Russian Armenian billionaire Samvel Karapetyan, who's actually running the campaign while under house arrest. He actually technically can't even run because he's a Russian citizen. So the campaign is actually being run via his nephew and a good part of the rest of his family. They have a tremendous amount of resources, and you actually see it in the product that they're putting out. They've hired top-notch consultants, one of them being Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's consultant. And it's very hard to get on social media without seeing their ads, and the quality of their work is frankly much higher than you've seen in Armenian campaigns before. Let's go to one of the spots right now.
Կան մարդիկ, ովքեր անընդհատ զբաղված են մեզ բաժանելով։ Սա վնասում է մեր անվտանգությանը, մեր տնտեսությանը ու ժողովրդի միասնականությանը։ Նա չի դադարի պառակտել, մենք պետք է կանգնեցնենք սա։ Փոփոխության ժամանակն է։ Հզոր առաջնորդ, հզոր Հայաստան։
And analyzing this, this 800-pound gorilla in the room about Mr. Karapetyan and his party is two things. To what extent is his campaign a Russian state project, one, and two, is he actually going to be banned or allowed to register? And there's a reasonable chance that he will not be able to, given the political atmosphere that we're in right now. On the first matter, it's highly unlikely that someone of Mr. Karapetyan's stature with billions of dollars in Russia would have done this without getting some sort of a green light from the Russian state. At the same time, the Russian state, as we know, has a tremendous capacity of betraying anybody who is their friends and throwing them under the bus. His candidacy actually makes sense from a Russian perspective if you think the Kocharyans of the world are going nowhere and you have to go to another track. Mr. Karapetyan has a generally positive footprint in Armenia. He's been a businessman who's invested hundreds of millions of dollars here. He's sort of revolutionized the retail sector. So he's not viewed as your typical Armenian oligarch that is generally or universally disliked. The fact and the reality is that the ruling party and their Western cohorts and friends will do whatever they can to make Karapetyan the face of Russia in Armenia and make him a Russian, essentially the Russian party in this election, because that's the easiest way to defeat him. Now, there's some interesting nuances here. His nephew Narek has actually said that he is supportive of the TRIP project, unlike President Kocharyan, and he said that he would actually negotiate on it. Most likely, there's a very good chance that he takes away from the base of Mr. Kocharyan because they have overlapping bases. On the second matter, will the party get banned? It's entirely feasible for that to happen, but banning them, frankly, would be a political disaster, which could very well backfire against this government and unite a good part of the opposition against them. Now let's move on to the second big group that's actually making a splash in Armenian politics. It's a new party called Bolorin Dem, which actually means we're against all. For the most part, they are IT professionals, young, affluent, very functional. And people have been waiting for IT people to actually get into politics, and they're finally making the splash into the system. There's not that much that unites these people, except the desire to change the electoral system, nationalism, and military defense. Those are their primary issues. What they promise is to take power for 100 days, change the electoral system, get rid of the supermajority, disband in 100 days, and have new elections. Now, all of this, frankly, sounds very eccentric, but if you understand that no one is likely to get 50% in the first round, there's going to be lots of bargaining room for them to bargain for what they want. The issue is to what extent will voters understand all of this, because all of this is frankly rather eccentric. Most likely they will either be a spectacular success, sort of like some of those European parties, the populist parties that are about tearing down the system, or they would fade away into nothingness very quickly. Then there's Gagik Tsarukyan's party. It's called Prosperous Armenia. Mr. Tsarukyan is the eccentric billionaire, the one who's building the giant Jesus statue this year. He's played this political game for a long time. He enters politics, he's been out of it. And it's very obvious why he's running this time, because given the scattered nature of politics, he can actually be a kingmaker just by getting 4 or 5% of the vote. If he actually works it, especially in his region in Kotay, he should be able to pass the 4% threshold without much of a problem. In the past, he has a tendency of holding his cards and essentially going with the winner or choosing the winner, and I suspect this is what he's going to do this time also. Now we're going to move on to Aram Sarkisyan's party, which is called the Republic Party, which should not be mistaken by the traditional Republican Party of Serge Sarkisyan. This is a completely different setup. Aram Sarkisyan is obviously best known for being Vazgen Sarkisyan's brother. Them and some other people like Arman Babajanyan are sort of the loyal opposition to this government. This government has always wanted to have pro-Western forces that are more pro-Western than them to make them look reasonable. Their job is to attack Russia in ways that this government isn't willing to do so and be overtly pro-EU. This was the group that actually put up the referendum for Armenia joining the EU. They are not likely to pass the minimal threshold because at the end of the day, if people want to vote for Nikol Pashinyan, they will vote for Nikol Pashinyan, not some people who are close to him but are not like him. And I suspect there's a reasonable chance that the ruling party might regret asking these people to run, because the 3 to 5% of the vote that they're likely to get between the one or two parties that they have is actually votes coming out of the prime minister's column. The next party is just another new one. It's actually called Mother Armenia Party. It's controlled by Andrei Tevanyan. Mr. Tevanyan was actually part of the Kocharyan coalition, and he broke off to start this party. One of the reasons we're mentioning them is because they actually overperformed in local elections in Yerevan, in Gyumri, and Bagharshapat. So it means that they have actually local regional basis. They're overtly pro-Russian, and I think given their local basis, they might have a possibility of passing the 4% threshold, which will make them relevant in this process. Now we're going to go to one of our older parties, which is the Armenian National Congress, and its leader is Levon Zoroabian. For people who don't know, this is actually first President Levon Ter-Petrosyan's party. They've entered politics again in this cycle. They've underperformed in many of the past few elections. They're generally, frankly, very nice people, but they're not likely to become close to getting to the 4% threshold. I suspect that there's a very good chance they will join in a coalition with one or two of the other parties as a grouping. Most likely, if I was to bet, with Samvel Karapetyan's party. Now we're going to move on to another new entree that's actually making a splash in the electoral process this year. It's Armen Tatoyan's Wings of Unity party. Mr. Tatoyan is the former human rights ombudsman. He's been very critical of this government when it comes to dealing with the enemy state. He has very vocally asked the former presidents and their parties not to participate in the election, because he makes the case that they actually help Nikol Pashinyan and nobody else. He is clearly trying to become the third force in our political process, i.e. not old regime and not current regime. He has taken very pro-US positions, is very openly supportive of the TRIP agreement, while at the same time he's taken very hawkish positions on foreign policy and defense matters. The issue is, will he have the resources to actually get his message out against multiple well-resourced opponents like Mr. Karapetyan and the ruling party? The ruling party line of attack on him is that he's somehow tied to former President Serge Sarkisyan because he was actually a human rights ombudsman at that time. This is frankly not the greatest line of attack, since there's many people in the regime, in the government of Serge Sarkisian that actually have prominent roles in this one, like Eric Hacopian, who's the deputy prime minister, and Mr. Papoyan, who's the economic minister right now. The other participant in our elections, which essentially got launched about a week or 10 days ago, is again Mr. Kocharyan and his party, which is Hayashtan Dashink, which is a coalition of parties, which includes the ARF, the Dashnak Tuchun. He actually held a press conference to announce all of this. The good Lord himself has never produced a more loyal servant of the Russian state than Mr. Kocharyan. Everything that has gone wrong, according to him, in the past 5 or 6 years is because of our lack of loyalty to the Russian state. The primary point that he made outside of his Armenia-Russia relations is to be openly and very critical of the TRIP project, saying it's one of the greatest threats to this country. In analyzing this, frankly, Mr. Kocharyan is the best gift that's ever been given to Nikol Pashinyan, since a significant minority of voters still have as their primary task for Mr. Kocharyan and his likes to never come back to power. The moment he leaves the political scene, a good part of the prime minister's base will actually start looking at other options. If Mr. Kocharyan was actually serious about defeating the current prime minister, he would actually leave the political scene and hand over the party and put his resources behind someone like MP Anna Grigorian, who could be an upcoming political star if she becomes the person that's being highlighted rather than someone as unpopular as Mr. Kocharyan. Last but not least, we're going to move on to the party in power, KP, or the Prime Minister's party. Their game plan can be summed up into running against three things: Russia, the church, and the old regime. They want to run against all the unpopular institutions as they see it. They want to pick their own opponents. And I think in this case, Mr. Samuel Karapetyan is actually out of central casting if it's not Kocharyan, because they can create a much better contrast with him than they can with other people. On the positive side, they're obviously going to try to run on the peace agreement and a move towards the West, both of those things that are generally popular. What's interesting is this: they've actually dropped some of the rhetoric and the emphasis on the peace agreement and on this new Armenia concept, the real Armenia concept, partly because I don't think it polls very well, at least from the polling that we have seen. If you actually listen to the Prime Minister's statement on Army Day, he actually, for the first time ever, started talking about military strength and other matters, which he's never really talked about before. They will do all they can to prevent any party that is one of these third-way parties, what they do not want is any party that is seen as not tied into the Nakhkins or pro-Western. That is the most problematic party for them. So they will try to attack everyone and make whoever groupings come out like that as being pro-Russian or Russian fronts. The negativity in campaigning is actually quite helpful to them. It's actually part of the strategy, is because generally the lower the turnout, especially the lower the youth turnout, because in polling they're actually the weakest among young people, they will benefit most from it, from the basic, the base voters that they have tend to be older, rural, and they tend to be better voters. So negativity is a good way to drive down turnout. Now let me discuss the importance of young voters, because in most electoral systems, young voters actually matter the least because they have the least resources and they're less likely to vote. In Armenia, they're less likely to vote, but they actually have the most resources, because in Armenia, the social pyramid is actually upside down. People who are under 30 tend to make more money than their parents, so they're actually breadwinners of their family way before the time, and they're obviously generally tend to be more wired into the world and how things work, and they tend to be generally better educated or more westernized in the way of what they demand from their political actors. So how the problem, young voters not liking this government is actually a huge issue. And you see it in some of the things the Prime Minister does in trying to outreach to them as far as being in a band and other silly things like that. But young voters have a very specific, above average importance in our electoral process, mostly because of our upside down social pyramid. What is clear is that this year's elections will be far more competitive than the ones in 21, which was a simple binary choice between pre- and post-revolutionary forces. What will decide this year's elections is going to be two things: youth turnout, do young people come out? By young people, we mean 18 to 29, equal to their population size, and if they actually do come out in large numbers, it almost certainly guarantee a second round of the election. And secondly is, where do middle class, higher income voters go? And almost all of them are in Yerevan. These are people that have voted for their prime minister before, but he's essentially lost almost all of them. So the issue is, can he scare them back into voting for him based on their dislike of the opposition? The answer to these two questions will decide this year's elections. Thank you for joining me in this week's episode of Insights.
Քանի որ մենք միասին ենք աշխատում մեր предвыборный կամպանիայի շուրջ, կարանք հիմա փաստացի ասենք, որ ուժեղ Հայաստանում չի լինի անբավարարված կին։
Տենց բան հայտարարենք, պատասխանություն առնվազն նախարարություն ուրեմն պետք է ստեղծի, որ այս հարցերը կուրացիա կանի։ Սեքսի նախարարություն։
Ինչքան ես գիտեմ, առանց սեքսի դեմոգրաֆիկ հարցն էլ չի լուծվում։ Ինչքան ես գիտեմ, չգիտեմ, կարող է այլ տարբերակներ կան դեմոգրաֆիկ հարցը լուծելու, բայց ինձ թվում է դրանից է սկսվում։